were a series of vulnerabilities that affected a specific Apache application called Log4j, specifically the version 2 of that particular application. And a what we call proof of concept code was made public on Twitter, as how things happen now most days. But over a period of time, there were a number of vulnerabilities that were released associated with the same package software. And these events collectively were on the public webs were referred to as Log4j.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Greisiger with Net Diligence. Today, we're continuing our conversation with industry experts, and I have the great fortune of speaking with Yinan Yang of CrowdStrike. Yinan is a director of incident response. Yinan, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Mark. Good to be connected again.
Yep. So one of the reasons why we do this, Yinan and I explained, is we support a lot of folks in the cyber insurance community. Many of the major carriers, many of the major brokers, and also the clients who buy the cyber insurance, just the same folks, quite frankly, that CrowdStrike supports. And we like to have these conversations to keep our partners educated about trends. And this is more of a technical issue today that, I pinged you guys on and you were kind enough to talk to me about it. We're going to talk about Log4j, or it's also called Log4Shell, and I know you'll further explain it. But when these technical issues pop up and they become a mass media event, a lot of our insurance partners get a little nervous because they're worried about the impact on their policyholders. And they're also worried about systemic and aggregation risk. Some major event or exploit or threat actor being able to really cause a loss across a whole portion of their book of business. And we also want to just keep the clients themselves, who maybe aren't worried about the systemic risk issue, but they're worried about the impact to themselves, apprised. So, I'd love to dive right into this thing. And so if you could just maybe talk me through what is Log4j? What is that issue about?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially back in December of 2021, there were a series of vulnerabilities that affected a specific Apache application called Log4j, specifically the version 2 of that particular application. And what we call proof of concept code was made public on Twitter, as how things happen now most days. But over a period of time, there were a number of vulnerabilities that were released associated with the same package software. And these events collectively were on the public webs were referred to as Log4j.
So let's stay on there. We talked a little bit about this offline, but I want to hear more. What do you think are the common challenges around the Log4j and 0 days, as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of the most common challenges associated specifically with this is that not only is it a 0-day situation in which there was not a patch available, right, for that particular vulnerability. The other thing was that organizations can't effectively mitigate the risk because they aren't aware that the Log4j package is a component of a software that they actually use. So think of, if you're using something like I use, Microsoft Outlook, or I use, OneNote, whatever application that you're actually using, you may not know that in some cases under the hood, a component of that software is Log4j that performs the backend logging function. And as a result, it made it really challenging for organizations to understand if they in fact have this risk in their environment. And even if they did, they aren't sure if they have the visibility to be able to tell if something was wrong before it was too late.
Thanks, Yinan. So describe a little bit for the audience, like what have we learned so far? Maybe where do things stand today?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we saw early on was that immediately in the aftermath of when this information became public, we saw very much so the typical opportunistic mass exploitation that we see. A lot of things were, generally with the intent of creating crypto miners, right? So they're just scanning the internet across the board, and anything that comes up, they're going to exploit it, put a crypto miner on it because they want to consume that resource and generate some, revenue for them, right? Unfortunately, as many as these things have happened, similar to past instances as well, pretty quickly it became adapted into the toolkits of various groups. Those include targeted intrusion groups. So we've certainly released information as it relates to suspected certain nation states or leveraging this as an ability to get into organizations. But also, I think on top of most folks' minds now, ransomware groups, right? They're leveraging this not only as a method to gain access into the environment, but they are also using this particular vulnerability or exploitation of this vulnerability as a post-exploit action, meaning that once we're in, maybe via the traditional phishing, right, user click method, we're going to then use this to pivot into something. An example is what we call hypervisor jackpotting, getting a little bit technical, but essentially targeting the infrastructure underneath everything that's being hosted for an organization, right? So a couple of different use by these groups right now.
Thank you for that. So let's maybe wrap up this technical conversation, Ian, and I just was hoping you can cover, let's look down the road a little bit and, talk to the audience a little bit about preparing for the next inevitable 0-day event that's happening, incident response planning that may be factored into this, proactively working with your cyber insurance partners, and maybe even implementing retainers. So.
Absolutely. And Mark, I'm glad you brought that up because I delivered a presentation last week just with regards to general cases that we've kind of come across, aggregated in a couple of examples. And I shared with them a few top lessons learned, right? Like you alluded to, this is not the first and it's not going to be the last situation in which an organization can be doing all the right things, right? They're patching, they are taking the proper mitigation steps, but ultimately it's the result of a third-party risk that resulted in some situation within their own organization that they then need to respond to, right? So what we have found across the board is that successful organizations that responded to this, really, they excelled in the basics. Certainly having certain tooling, having visibility and having coverage in terms of prevention and detection certainly helps. But the things that made a big difference are things like, do we have a thorough understanding of our internal environment, right? Like, where are my assets? Where does the end of my environment cover stops, right? Are we doing things like implicit denied network rules for internet bound traffic, in which by default, we don't allow any outbound internet traffic just indiscriminately, something like that, right? And additionally, something like, do we have a coherent cross-functional communication strategy within our organization, in that it's not just IT team talking to IT team or the security team talking within the security team? Can the security team understand the right points of contact with a application development or a DevOps team to understand what they have in motion and what they might be packaging in their in the systems that they're leveraging, to be able to understand, are you exposed, are you not exposed, and how can we assist in sort of responding to that. Additionally, something like a detection and response focused strategy for mitigation is absolutely more effective in situations where a high degree of uncertainty is expected, right? And I would definitely include 0-day vulnerabilities or even supply chain compromises in that category. Again, you can be doing all the things right within your organization, right? But ultimately, you cannot put all your eggs in the prevention basket, because something like this that you don't control is going to lead to a compromise of your organization, right?
Yep. I mean, that you did a great job summarizing that. I mean, and just talking about 0-day attacks, and sometimes in the cyber insurance industry, they talk about black swan events and things like that. It's just kind of the unknown. How do you plan for the unknown? Incident response planning for us, and I know the cyber insurance underwriting community, is crucial. And in any plan, we recommend the clients, they need to list experts like yourself, because something inevitable is going to happen. And they need to be able to get to a person like yourself right away, even if it's unfortunately a Saturday night and 10 o'clock at night and their systems are locked down. They may need to reach you guys. I also think that a lot of small entities, SMEs, that the insurance industry refers to them, they do a good job. We're seeing them doing a better job at putting in place some proactive controls like endpoint protection, EDR. I know you guys are competitive in selling that kind of stuff, but we think it's important that they still really stay in touch with someone like yourself or a technical team, because they might not still have the skills to know what they're looking at on a day-to-day basis when something like this is happening. So it's almost like you need a key partner in this space for normal business, in my opinion. And it's something we kind of evangelize to SMEs on a daily basis these days. So thank you, Yinan. That was really good summary. Again, greatly appreciate your time. I will be circling back with you on this, and I want to thank everybody else for viewing this today. Cheers.